Morant with a running start. Elevate! Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness!
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies returned from the All-Star break, and they lost to the Indiana Pacers, despite being fully healthy for the first time in 3 years. So on today's episode, I'm going to talk about the loss to the Pacers. I'm going to talk about the return of Lamar Stevens. I'm going to talk a little bit about NBA All-Star Weekend and what went on there. I got a lot of stuff to get to in a very short amount of time. So here we go. Let's start with NBA All-Star Weekend. Of course, Jaren Jackson Jr. was representing the Grizzlies, making his second All-Star appearance. I think as Grizzlies fans, we can be proud of the effort that Jaren showed. He actually was aggressive on offense. I would argue he was more aggressive than any Grizzlies player ever in the NBA All-Star game. Ja Morant, of course, very casual in his two appearances. Marc Gasol, a deferential player. The last time Jaren was there, he, was just a backup, didn't really get that much playing time. Now, Jaren did not get a lot of playing time in this one, but that was mainly because of the weird format, the awkward tournament format. Jaren only got to play in one basketball game that went to 40. His team lost. But again, Jaren blocked 2 shots. He got a steal. He competed. He contested numerous shots. He tried on defense. Amazing effort from Jaren. Unfortunately, we only got a brief glimpse of him due to the game being very, very short. Now, on All-Star Sunday night, Zach Edey and Jalen Wells were involved because Zach Edey and Jalen Wells, their team in the Rising Stars Challenge, won the event on Friday night. Thus, they got to play on Sunday, and they competed well. I think we can nitpick a little bit with our Grizzlies players and maybe wish they did a little bit better. Like Zach Edey was going against a team that had no center. Kevin Durant was guarding him, but Edey got his shot blocked from behind by Jason Tatum. He had a post up on Durant where he kind of rushed it and missed it. He did score on a tip-in. Jalen Wells scored on one of his slow-down mid-range jumper moves. By the way, I was extremely curious because I'm very interested, I guess, in stats and basketball history. I was very interested to know if the statistics from All-Star Sunday night, if they would get counted in the All-Star game all-time scoring logs. Like, I wanted to know, even though Zach Edey and Jalen Wells are clearly not All-Stars, they did score in an All-Star game. Does that count? Do they have more points in an All-Star game than other guys who never made the All-Star team and stuff like that? And it turns out not only do Jalen and Zach Edey's stats not count, like none of the Rising Stars players' stats count in the all-time record books. No one else's stats count either. According to Basketball Reference, none of the stats from All-Star Sunday night count. Like right now, Jaren, he picked up 2 blocks. He did not pass Marc Gasol for the most blocks in an All-Star game in Grizzlies franchise history. Jaren's 2 blocks did not count. Also, by the way, this is my personal theory why LeBron James did not play. They presented to LeBron James, hey, you're going to be playing the Rising Stars team, and oh, by the way, none of your points, rebounds, assists count in the all-time record books. And so LeBron's like, no thanks, I'm good. My ankle's a little bit hurt. So that part of it I thought was weird, but at the very least, we got to see Jalen and Zach play on that big stage. We got to be proud about how Jaren competed in the All-Star game. Now, coming out of the All-Star break, Of course, the Grizzlies have this back-to-back. Thursday night against the Pacers, then they have to fly to Florida and play the Magic on Friday night. I think the most notable thing about the game on Thursday was that the injury report was totally clean. The only name on there was Johnny Davis, listed as not with team. By the way, Johnny Davis, since that injury report came out, finally got waived. We assumed this was going to happen. Johnny Davis gets waived, and oh, by the way, they have an open roster spot, and they're using it on familiar friend Lamar Stevens. Lamar Stevens, after playing well for the Grizzlies last year, gets a 10-day contract to be the 15th main roster player. I'm intrigued by this. I remember last year how much we enjoyed watching him play, but also going into the offseason, I remember spelling out, like, guys, they're not going to use a roster spot on Lamar Stevens. He doesn't really shoot. He's an undersized forward. Yes, he played well, but I can't imagine them bringing him back on a regular contract. Well, they're not yet bringing him back on a regular contract, but lo and behold, he found his way back to the team, so that part is pretty exciting. I think, for Grizzlies fans, Lamar, a competitor, is the word I would use to describe him, despite being undersized, despite not being a great shooter, despite maybe never passing the basketball. He still contributes, and that is the reason that I think the Grizzlies are giving him another look this season. Now, I guess before I get to the Pacers game, I could talk a little bit about what they could do with that open roster spot. I'd been monitoring it for a player like Markelle Fultz, but Markelle Fultz, he signed with the Kings. Feels like a good pickup there for the Kings. There are still some other, I guess, guys with more NBA experience than Lamar Stevens who were out there that if they were healthy, I feel like they could help the Grizzlies maybe more than Lamar. But there's no one really out there who I'd be super excited about if they brought in. Like a guy like Lonnie Walker, the Sixers picked him up. I don't know if we needed another gunner of that type off the bench. It does seem like maybe for the postseason, I keep thinking they might need another emergency big or an emergency ball handler. Well, Lamar Stevens is neither one of those things, but he is right now the 15th guy on a 10-day contract. Now, about that Pacers game, yes, the team was totally healthy. We get to see what the roster looks like post-trade deadline. No more Marcus Smart. And it started off well. The Grizzlies got up to a 12-2 lead. They led 20-7. They were up double digits for most of the first quarter. They held a 7-point lead 4 minutes into the second quarter. Then it kind of all fell apart. The story of this game was the Pacers scoring 50 points in the second quarter. That's the most points the Grizzlies have ever allowed in a quarter. The Pacers turned that double-digit deficit into a double-digit lead. It was kind of funny because this game, being in Eastern time, was a little bit earlier. I was watching the game with my kids. Then my wife and I stopped to eat dinner, and I yelled over to my son. I'm like, hey, what's the score right now? And he's like, it's Indiana 68, Memphis 50. And I'm like, what? We were up by 10 when I stopped watching. But anyways, I went back and watched, and the Pacers started making some tough shots in the second quarter, but then the shots became less and less difficult. They were beating the Grizzlies on leakouts. After the Grizzlies missed shots, the Pacers were getting layups. Then there seemed to be a lot of confusion on defense. Both players going under screens. You had Tyrese Halliburton getting some easy walk-up three-pointers. You also, once the main starters subbed back in for the Grizzlies, then you had Ja Morant, whose effort maybe didn't seem all the way there. He was getting switched on to Pascal Siakam. Ja's not going to defend Pascal Siakam in the post. You had guys like Aaron Nesmith hustling for offensive rebounds. It was not a pretty sight. The Pacers ended up making 15 of their final 18 field goal attempts to finish the quarter. They made 12 of their final 19 three-pointers in the first half. In that first half, the Grizzlies, they took 25 twos and 25 threes. They made 16 of 25 two-pointers, which is fantastic. They only made 7 out of 25 three-pointers, which is not very good. The Pacers, meanwhile, in that 50-point second quarter, 11 assists, 0 turnovers, and 16 for 23 field goal attempts. And that's with them missing 3 out of their first 4 field goal attempts of the quarter. So the Pacers got ahead by 26. Start of the second half, they had another 7-0 run. They led 85-59. The Grizzlies then bounced back. They had a big run to eventually cut the lead to 4. The end of that run, I must note, I am contractually obligated to note, the end of that run was them outscoring the Pacers 12-0 when Vince Williams Jr. checked in. But it ended up being a 28-6 run that cut it from a 26-point lead to a 4-point lead, but the Grizzlies got no closer, and they lose back-to-back games. Now, the Grizzlies haven't lost back-to-back games very often this year. I don't know if this one really counts because you had that whole All-Star break in between. I mean, technically they lost back-to-back games, but there was a week off in between them. They have, in fact, lost 3 out of 4, which is not ideal, especially when you line that up with the NBA trade deadline and you consider the moves that were made or weren't made. So the Grizzlies have lost 3 of 4. Now, the defeats are to good teams. They lost to the Thunder. They lost on the road to the Clippers. They lost on the road to the Pacers. In these 4 games, Jaren Jackson Jr. has failed to score 20 points in all of them. This is the longest streak of the season for Jaren failing to hit 20 points. Remember, he had scored 30 or more in 3 straight games, but now the last 4 games, he's failed to score 20. And it's not like he had a bad game in any of these games, really. I mean, Jaren was 7 for 14 from the field, had 18 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks. He just maybe is being used a little bit less in the past 4 games. Also, Jaren had foul trouble in this game, picked up his 5th foul early in the 4th quarter and went to the bench. He ended up playing a total of 30 minutes. Desmond Bane had, I think, a really good game. He continues being arguably, I guess, along with Jaren, the most consistent player for the Grizzlies. Desmond was 9 for 16 from the field with 23 points. That's a team high. Also had a team high 7 assists, had 5 rebounds and 2 blocks. Bane continues having just a tremendous season. I think notably, you have to point out Ja Morant had what we would call a pretty bad game. And also it comes on the heels of rumors over the All-Star break of league executives thinking Ja is a guy to watch. This is something that Howard Beck said on a podcast. Now, he said it extemporaneously on a podcast, and certainly perhaps he's reporting what a league executive said to him. It's no big deal. It did, however, get a response out of Zach Kleiman. Drew Hill got Zach Kleiman to go on the record with a response saying, that other executives are fantasizing about acquiring Ja. Underestimate Ja and the Grizzlies at your own peril. Well, there was not like the awesome bounce back game to back up Zach Kleiman's quotes. In this one, Ja was 4 for 15 from the field, had 12 points, 6 assists, and 5 turnovers, had 0 rebounds as the Grizzlies lose to Indiana. And they lose to another good team. And that, of course, is a big talking point about the Grizzlies. Their performance against good teams. And it hasn't really been ideal. And I actually was looking at some of the numbers for how the Grizzlies have performed against the top 10 teams in net rating and then the bottom 10 teams in net rating. And I think a lot of people have maybe correctly identified the Grizzlies as a team that just chews up the bad competition and is not nearly as good against the good competition. And one stat that I thought was really illuminating about that is just looking at the Grizzlies' offensive rating. When you play the top 10 teams in net rating, or you play the middle 10 teams in net rating, or the bottom 10 teams in net rating. Like right now, the Grizzlies, when they play one of the 10 worst teams based on net rating, and this is using Cleaning the Glasses net rating stats, the Grizzlies have a 126.2 offensive rating when playing the bottom 10 teams. That's second in the NBA behind just the Cavaliers. Now, when you play the middle 10 teams in net rating, the Grizzlies have a very respectable 119 offensive rating. That's good for fifth in the NBA. When you go to the Grizzlies' performance against the top 10 teams, the Grizzlies' offensive rating this season against the top 10 teams based on net rating is 109.7, which is 17th. So the good offense, quote-unquote good offense, they're 17th in 16 games against the top 10 teams. They're 6-10 in those games. They're 17th in offensive rating. Meanwhile, Cleveland has a 124 offensive rating when playing the top 10 teams. The Celtics have a 123 offensive rating against the top 10 teams. The Knicks have a 120 offensive rating against the top 10 teams. The Thunder have a 119 offensive rating against the top 10 teams. Those are the title contenders. Meanwhile, the Grizzlies have a 109.7. So even this game against the Pacers, who, by the way, aren't even a top 10 team based on net rating. They're, I think, 11th. But like the Pacers held the Grizzlies in check offensively. The Pacers are built for scoring. They're built for that second quarter where they drop 50 on the Grizzlies. They are a fast-breaking team. The Grizzlies didn't seem prepared for a team to flip the tables on them and do the same fast breaking that the Grizzlies like to do against other teams. But the Grizzlies' offense wasn't good enough. Maybe it was just three-point shooting. Maybe some of it's G.G. Jackson's defense. More on that in a second. But I think this loss kept showing that the Grizzlies, when playing the best teams, have some significant issues that are going to keep them, I think, from being one of the elite teams. But let's take a quick break, and then I have a few more stats that I want to share with you to wrap up the episode. All right, this game was a homecoming of sorts for several Grizzlies players. Of course, you had Desmond Bane returning to the state he grew up in. Bane had another good game against the Pacers. Like I said, 23 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. Zach Edey, of course, played at Purdue. There were apparently hundreds, I don't know, a large contingent of Zach Edey fans there cheering on Edey. He delivered 11 rebounds and a block and a made three. He did, however, get cooked pretty badly on defense by Miles Turner in that second quarter. Zach being asked to guard a big who shoots threes. It did not work out very well for him. Also, I guess it was a homecoming game for John Conchar. He only got in for garbage time in the last 90 seconds. Jalen Wells, not a homecoming, but he had a relatively strong game offensively, although he was one of those guys, when I'm rewatching the second quarter, just getting caught on screens and leaving shooters open. But Jalen had 17 points, had 8 made free throws. Pretty sure that's a career high on made free throws for Jalen Wells. Had 17 points, was 4 for 8 from the field. Vince Williams Jr. played a season-high 21 minutes. I thought Vince was a big, bright spot from this game. I'm unbelievably biased, however. I felt like when he came in the first quarter, I'm pretty sure he got 3 rebounds in the span of like 30 seconds. He also assisted on 6 points. Now, he only got credit for 1 assist. He assisted a three-pointer. Then he assisted Jalen Wells, who got fouled on his three-point shot. Jalen made all 3 of his free throws. He also, in the second half, or maybe it was second quarter, he kept whipping these skip passes to wide open shooters. Unfortunately, no one made the shots. I still maintain Vince Williams Jr. throws the fastest passes on the entire team. Vince, for the game, 6 rebounds, 7 points, 2 assists, and a steal. Santi Aldama only made 2 out of 10 three-pointers, had 10 points and 7 boards and 3 assists. Brandon Clark, 4 points, 1 steal, 1 assist. Luke Kennard only made 2 out of 5 three-pointers. By the way, over the All-Star break, Luke's high school court was renamed in his honor. That was just one thing that Grizzlies players were doing over the break. Also, by the way, Desmond Bane had his jersey retired at TCU. Now, Vince Williams Jr., like you know, I'm a big fan of. I think one fun stat for him so far He's barely played 200 possessions, but right now the Grizzlies have a plus 21 net rating when Vince Williams Jr. is on the court. Now, net rating, on-off net ratings, they can be misleading. It's just one data point, one stat to consider. However, it does match up with my eye test on Vince. He has provided energy, rebounding, and passing that the team has needed, even if the team hasn't really gotten the results of late with Vince Williams Jr. in the rotation. And one player who the stats are not kind on right now, it's G.G. Jackson. G.G. took 10 shots, only made 3 of them, had 9 points and 4 rebounds in his 16 minutes. And right now for the season, there are some troubling / concerning stats beginning to grow for G.G. Jackson. According to Cleaning the Glass right now, G.G. Jackson, he has a 22% usage, which is fine because he's a scorer. That's his role. He's supposed to do these things. However, less good, he's in the 36th percentile for points per shot attempt among forwards. Not ideal. He's in the 3rd percentile in his assist percentage per usage. Like, based on the amount of usage he has, he's in the 3rd percentile for how few assists he gets. He's also in the 7th percentile among forwards for turning the basketball over. Right now, he's turning the ball over 16% of the time when he uses a possession. But the maybe even more concerning numbers for G.G. Jackson, it's that he's tanking the defense. Now, again, defensive rating, it's a team stat. It goes for everyone on the court. And maybe this is just a coincidence. Eye test says, no, he's not really defending that well out there. Right now, the Grizzlies' defense is a whopping 16 points per 100 possessions worse when he's on the court. In about 200 minutes of playing time, the Grizzlies have a 126 defensive rating when G.G. is out there. That is the same offensive rating the Grizzlies have when they play one of the 10 worst teams in the NBA. He has an overall negative net rating. He and Jay Huff are the only 2 players on the team right now with a negative net rating. So, G.G., there's a lot, I think, being asked of him, and I am in favor of them giving him minutes because I think to get where you want to go, to win a first-round playoff series, to be a multi-year title contender, we need the G.G. Jackson pick to hit. We need G.G. to become an elite player. And right now, it hasn't gone great. His shooting numbers are poor, flat out, and now also his defensive numbers have been very, very bad, but hopefully he will be able to rebound. Now, coming up, the Grizzlies have a chance to bounce back from this loss by playing the Magic. It's another early tip on Friday. They got past in the standings on Thursday. Their loss combined with the Nuggets win over the Hornets put the Nuggets in second. So the Grizzlies, based on the Nuggets winning a bunch of games in a row and now losing 3 or 4, have dropped a spot in the standings. Hopefully on Friday night, they can bounce back. And with that, that is everything for today. An announcement, by the way, next Friday, February 28th, that's the next Grizzlies watch party in Nashville. It's a big Knicks game. So come on out to Noble's Beer Hall. That's Noble's East in Nashville, Tennessee. The game's at 7. We'll be giving away a bunch of prizes and stuff. It's a fun time to hang out with other Grizzlies fans and watch the game in a public setting. Noble's Beer Hall next Friday, February 28th. If you want to support my show and get access to bonus content, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Oh, and by the way, I guess I should mention it. Victor Wembanyama is out for the year. This was in my notes, and I just realized I missed it. Victor Wembanyama has a concerning diagnosis of a deep vein thrombosis, which is not an issue that I'm told young people should have or elite athletes, so he's going to miss the rest of the year. The reason I mentioned it on the Grizzlies show is because that's one player that was ahead of Jaren Jackson Jr. in like the All-NBA competition who's not going to be eligible to make an All-NBA team. Also, of course, the Defensive Player of the Year race where Victor was the heavy favorite. He's no longer going to be eligible because he's not going to play 65 games, meaning Jaren Jackson Jr. is now the betting favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. So it's a bad bit of luck for the Spurs and a bad bit of luck for Victor. And we, of course, wish Victor the best. We hope he gets healthy, has no lingering issues with this. But this is the Grizzlies show, and this injury directly impacts the Grizzlies because Jaren almost certainly going to make All-NBA, meaning they can sign him to a designated player extension and possibly get an extension done before he hits free agency. And also, Jaren now has the inside track to possibly winning his second Defensive Player of the Year award. Anyways, as I was saying, to support my show, patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Hope you'll have a good weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.